If we look around us and we have people that are not committed, are we committed to them first? Do we first love them? Do we first commit to them? Are we first invested in them and they reciprocate? Or are we expecting them to commit first? All commit when you commit,
Mm.
right? Which one's the leader? The person that commits first. And so that's why commitment, the first and biggest is the leader. They generally speaking will make the biggest commitment and the first commitment, and others choose to follow and commit along the way.
Welcome to ReedFlections, a podcast on life, leadership, and learning. I'm Art Calderon. I'm here with Reed Nyffeler, who is a CEO of a growing global company. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. He's also a father and an author. Season 2, we're knee-deep in it, developing authentic and intentional leaders this entire season. Now, episodes 5 through 8, talking about who should you develop. That's part of being a leader. You're developing other leaders. Episodes 5 and 6, we talked about character and charisma, or as the kids say, Riz. Now, episode 7, we're in episode 7, high commitment, being committed to whatever the goal is. Why should you look for high commitment among potential leaders?
Yeah, really, we don't see any outcome without commitment, right? I mean, I remember my youngest child, he was starting kindergarten, and it was the first week of school. And he came back and I said, "How'd it go?" He said, "I think I made a mistake signing up for this kindergarten." That's not demonstrating high commitment. I mean, the part on the other side, you see kids when they graduate and they're committed to school. I mean,
Yeah.
that's, a large part of your life at that point. I mean, ultimately, you're going for what, 200 days a year, and you've done that over 15 years of schooling, probably 14, 13 years of schooling. And so that's a long level of commitment. And we see the progress in that, right? From that first day of kindergarten all the way to graduating high school. And that requires commitment each and every day over an extended period of time. And you see commitment. And so I've also recognized as a leader, there's nothing more important when picking someone that we're going to partner with or have at a senior level of leadership than commitment. Because by then we've walked through the first chapters, right, of character. They wouldn't be in my sphere of influence if they didn't have character because I just can't trust them, right? I just can't trust they're going to deliver. And then to a certain level of leadership or partnership, you need the balance of charisma, right? Somebody that can speak on your behalf and or step up on your behalf. But then that commitment is usually where it starts to go another direction with regard to partnership. And so I remember an early partner, and we have to get security licenses in each of our states, or about 40 plus of our states. And that first state we were trying to operate in was Arizona. And the research was done and it was going to be difficult to get a license. He said, "All right, well, we shouldn't open this business." And I said, "What?" I mean, here we are at our very first
Just because it
hurdle.
was difficult.
Just because it was difficult, I'm like, all right, now I already had concerns about the level of commitment with regard to the partnership because that was the first hurdle. And there's absolutely going to be times where there's hurdles in life. There's going to be times where there's hurdles in business.
Mhm.
And ultimately, our commitment to seeing it through is it was what matters. And I study leaders or successful people, and all of them will have a story where they had to double down their commitment at some stages. None of them are saying, I was the first to quit. I had the lowest commitment of all my peers, whether I was in grade school, all through high school and college. When the going got tough, I was the first one to run. That's how I practiced my sprints. I ran away from commitment, right? Nobody says that. They're all saying, I saw it through during the tough times. I was there. I committed all the way through and persevered. And that's why it's critical for a leader that we're choosing. They're committed to see it all the way through, because you're going to have difficult conversation with them if you're developing them. And it's going to lean on their commitment to see it through in effort to make progress as a leader.
So let's talk a little bit about commitment in the real life application of your business. Your business
Hmm.
is Signal,
Hmm.
right? Security company, name Signal, global. Started here in Nebraska. Uh, it's now what this year over $330 million in revenue. Didn't start out that way, did it?
No, we were
No,
$0, in
you
fact.
started at zero.
Yeah.
Talk about the commitment and that you had to have growing this business.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of elements to that, right? And we'll speak to two of them. One is, I'll talk about our global vision, right? Which is to be the world's largest security brand. And when I make a comment like that, we're got a long way to go. I mean, the largest brand does $18 billion. I mean, I
Wow.
there's a couple of zeros we're missing there. But ultimately, why is that? Why do I have some relative credibility? Because they've seen my level of commitment through that process, and it's not because I know how to get there necessarily or when we're going to get there, but I know I will get there.
Uh,
Why? Because of my commitment. I'm not going to stop until we do. Right? There's not going to be a hurdle or someone that's going to distract me or pull away. Well, that didn't happen because I made that pronouncement, say 4 or 5 years ago. It was a byproduct of demonstrated commitment I've made all the way through my career. And so recently I had some conversations with franchisees and they were concerned about some changes we're making in the business, which will help us achieve that goal, right? We
mhm.
have to make these changes in order to achieve that goal, some of which are technologies, some of which are how we're defining our territories. And I said to them at the time, I said, when have I committed to something without a plan? And they're saying, I haven't seen that, Reed. I said, some of them have known me for 15 years. They were early franchisees. And I said, well, then my credibility is around commitment. Now, if I said, when have I made a commitment to you that I've broken? I'm like, well, that hasn't happened yet, but that doesn't mean there can't be a first time. At the same time as our character is built on our ability to commit and follow through on that commitment.
Mhm.
Right. And so I remember early in my life, I said, let my yes be yes and my no be no. And so one of the most difficult commitments to me personally was I knew that when I'd met Dana, my wife, that I was committed to marrying her. And so people are like, well, that's pretty easy. A lot of people do that. Well, we started dating. Within 2 weeks, I knew that I was going to marry her.
So you
Well,
were committed, but we weren't sure if she was committed at this point.
yeah, we'll get to that part of the story. I think it's pretty sure she wasn't committed. I think we'll get to that part. But ultimately, that first 90 days, I thought things were going well, and this is definitely the woman that I want to marry. And I had been, waiting to have those characteristics in someone. And so then at the end of the summer, she goes, I'd like to end this relationship. I was like, and it might be a little bit of embellishment, but I think that's what I heard.
Oh,
Never talk to me
wow.
again. And then so then I'm like, well, that didn't work. I mean, I'm sitting there running. I remember going through my mind. I'm saying, okay, did God reveal this to me? Without that, I said, no. I'm pretty clear. This is who He wants me to marry. And so I was 100% committed. And so then I wrote 100 letters in a row. So I thought, well, she didn't want me to talk to her. So like, okay, well, that limits our communication. And with smoke signals next.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
No
but
emails.
so here I am committing myself to this relationship, and she wasn't clearly committed. And I mean, obviously, I wasn't, interested in anyone else at that time through that whole process. But I look back at that time, and I said that demonstration of a commitment was actually an example of the commitment that she can see in me now. And so, what we don't realize is that when the times are the most difficult, and we see through commitments is when things are going to be good, we're going to be committed. At the same time as there's always going to be trials in life and marriage and business. And who are we at those time of trials? And the first thing we should be is committed to seeing it through. That instead of quitting, which is the easiest thing to do, is it's not easy to stick through things. We need to commit. And so anytime we think we should quit, we need to commit. And especially if we believe in that purpose. Now, I'm not saying we should never quit. I'm saying if we've chosen, and just as I did with the story of my wife or this business, that this is ultimately the purpose that God has called us to and through, we should commit. And that doesn't mean, and so when do we, because I want to be very clear here that there are times to quit. And those are times when, it's not in accordance with our purpose or that we're ultimately, going to have some harm. But if it's something that we don't want to do the work, and
That shouldn't be the
that
reason.
shouldn't be the reason,
Mm,
right? That ultimately, if it's laziness or self-serving or it'd be easier not to, we should commit,
mm.
right? And that's where it's difficult is saying, oh, just like in the form of that license, oh, it's going to be a lot of paperwork and we got to try extra hard. I'd rather not do it. Well, that's a commitment issue, not a quitting
Right.
opportunity, right? Whereas also, just like with a relationship, if I knew without a shadow of a doubt that it was course hard, right? It's you don't want to be rejected, and believe me, it gave me a lot of practice. In fact, I look at it now back in the story with my wife. That's what prepared me for this role because I could face all sorts of rejection.
Do
Y-
you think she saw that it spoke to your character? Like, okay, well, this guy's dependable. Do you think that she saw
Absolutely.
that
Yeah, yeah.
eventually?
Yeah, I was working with her to learn. But I think absolutely she saw the commitment and even now we've been married over 25 years and 27 years and she goes, "Reed, the problem with your dreams is they become a reality." And that is her I think that's a compliment, really.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
Maybe.
a
I
little
mean, that's
backhanded.
she said the problem with your dreams. I just kind of bypass that. Your dreams become
Uh,
a reality. We kind of focus on that part. But she knows that's a result of my commitment, right? That
yeah.
some people have a dream and it doesn't become a reality because they quit on it. They
Mhm.
quit on their dream at some point. They quit because it's too hard or they can't invest the time or the resources yet I
Mhm.
have the commitment. And I think that's demonstrated in the little things, right? And so, many times I have early morning flights at 5 a.m. People are like, why do you do that to yourself? I said, because I'm committed to my priorities, right? My family and certainly my faith, but my family, I'm saying, I don't want to spend another night away. So I'm committing to waking up at 3 a.m. to go to catch a 5 a.m. flight. As opposed to being gone the night before for
Mhm.
another 12 hours when I can miss a dinner with my family or travel at night. And so that's a demonstration of commitment. And likewise, coming back, right? And I'm committing to the things that are my priorities instead of sleep or other things that would feed my laziness.
Well, let's talk a little bit about commitment in leaders specifically. What drives? Because you're talking about, at least with Signal, you're talking about 15 years of being committed in the face of all kinds of adversities, in the face of economic shutdowns, in the face of different partners coming and going, all kinds of things, right? So what how does that drive in a leader? What is it? What makes that go?
First of all, you have to understand that the leaders that are committed are the ones that get followed, right? I mean, there was, one person that is super high commitment and demonstrated that commitment in a different stage of their leadership journey was Martin Luther King Jr. He was willing to be arrested. He was willing to receive the persecution. Is he going to spend time in jail in his case, or demonstrating, or being beaten, or other things? And so that is where I think it was critical that he made a greater level of commitment, saying, "You know what? I'm not just going to sacrifice my time and do research. I'm not going to sacrifice my words from a pulpit at that stage or in a public. I'm going to sacrifice my livelihood." And that's where we saw a greater level of commitment, right? And it goes back to the previous season where we talked about first year in your thoughts, right? And we may commit in our thoughts, but then do we commit in our words? Maybe next. So we think a certain way, but do we commit to that? And then third, do we commit in our actions? And that's where really the rubber hits the road because many people, oh, I agree with you. I agree with you. My thoughts are aligned with you. I don't speak on that topic, but my thoughts are aligned with you. Are you really committed? The second, I'll say the same thing you're saying, or I'll even pronounce that, but I don't live it. Are we really committed? It's really when we see those three elements that we demonstrate our commitment, which is our thoughts, our words, and ultimately, as we saw with Martin Luther King Jr., his actions. He was demonstrating, he was marching, he was leading in that march. And that's how that commitment saw that outcome. And we're living in a different world because he was committed all the way through in his thoughts, words, and actions.
So when you're looking at people to develop,
Hmm.
you have people that often, I imagine, come to you and say, "Hey, I want part of your time. I want an hour. I want to pick your brain," uh, and you have to select who you're going to give that time, and you have limited resources. Who you're going to develop. How do you? I imagine commitment is something you're looking right. You're looking for someone who's going to commit to development or whatever the goal is. How do you spot that in those people, and how do you choose who to develop?
Well, and I think the key is really how they answer things. Because if there's a challenge right in front of them, there's either one, the people that I'm looking for that are high commit, they're looking for opportunities to improve or take ownership.
Mhm.
That means they're committed. The people that I don't invest in are the ones that find blame or excuses. And it is simply in their answer. It doesn't matter what it is. I mean, it could be, hey, traffic. I'm late because of traffic, right? So that is finding blame in something that is outside of their control. So they don't have any responsibility. They have low commitment
Mhm.
versus saying, I'm going to leave earlier,
Mhm.
right? I'll just leave earlier because there's a likely higher traffic person. That's someone that's committed. And so, but you're saying, well, Reed, they're just coming to a meeting and they're late and those things are outside of their control. No, they're 100% in their control because they could leave earlier. If you leave an hour earlier for a 30-minute drive or 10 minutes late, one, you're likely to be late and one, you're likely to be early. And that's within your control. And the other thing is their attitude. That's a demonstration of their commitment, right? If they're always looking for things that victimize them, then that's an attitude choice, right? You're saying, oh, well, I don't like the food choices, or the weather is too X, Y, and Z for me, or whatever the case might be. I'm victimized by these circumstances. You're not committed. You have to have the perfect environment to be successful. That's not commitment. Whereas you see people that, regardless of the environment, they're committed to success, right? And that's what I'm looking for is you can see that one, how do they speak to their language? And then two, what do they need to be successful? Which environment they need to be successful? They need a perfect environment, they're not committed, right? They need to see it through regardless of the resources that are at their disposal. Conversely, at the same time as when a challenge is confronting them, their level of commitment, if they're focused on blame or excuses, they're not committed. But if they're looking at opportunity and ways they can improve, they're committed.
Have you seen the story or heard of the story of the World War II soldier that enlisted to be a medic?
Hmm.
He was a conscientious objector. He was because of his religious beliefs, and he went through all kinds of almost just horrible treatment at the hands of his fellow soldiers because he refused to take a
Right.
weapon. And then ultimately, he ended up winning the Medal of Honor because of incredible heroic acts that he went through under fire to rescue some of his troops and to save their lives. Um, Tell me that to me that was very inspiring. I cannot imagine, having been former army man myself, just the incredible pressure, peer pressure that he must have been under, and yet he committed to what he believed in. You're under different kinds of pressure, and I've heard you talk about the pressure of leadership, but I never really appreciated how much different kinds of pressure you're under until I came to work here at Signal. Uh, Talk a little bit about, share a story of some pressures you have seen, either personally or other people, and yet commitment did not waver.
Yeah. And first and foremost, it's what are we committing to? And ultimately, that's where my faith is there throughout the history of time. We go back to Genesis and all the way through the entirety of the Bible, including Revelation. God is consistent. And so we know his expectations, we know what he wants from us. And so we can commit to things that are consistent. Whereas a lot of people commit to being liked, right? They want to commit to, I want to appeal to the audience that's in front of me. And that always changes, right? It depends on the audience we're in front of as well. And so if you're committed to being to appealing to the audience, which is where we feel that emotional pressure right there, to say, give me what I want, and that's when I'll like you. And if we're committed to getting the favor of man, then we're going to make poor decisions. And so there's countless times as a leader where I have made decisions that were not popular, right? The person in front of me didn't like that.
Mhm.
They didn't want that. They didn't feel like it was the right direction from their perspective, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's a tremendous amount of pressure to break that commitment, saying you change your mind, right? Whether it's a group of franchisees that come together, a group of employees, or even individuals that are there. And ultimately, in my mind, before I make that decision, I am 100% committed to it. I've committed to myself that if I don't believe in a decision, I won't make it.
Mhm.
And so I need to thoroughly understand that. That requires a tremendous amount of research to understand what I'm ultimately committing to. And then when I commit to it, I see it all the way through. And so, throughout this ownership, I've had multiple partners, financing partners, and many other groups. And I said, every time as I get to the end of that, they do kind of an interview with me to confirm that indeed I'm worth investing in or
Mhm.
partnering with, whatever else. I said, look throughout history. One thing I have always done is repaid my partners, and in excess of what they expected. I am committed on your behalf to do that for you. And I say that to the partners. And I said, look at their track record and the track record of the organization. And they say, well, there's things outside of that control. And I said, I would structure it with a personal guarantee or things that were dilutive to my financial investment to their benefit. I'd say, I'm not just committing in my words. I'm committing in the documentation that I will self sacrifice the returns I would get if I did not get you that return. And as a leverage of commitment, they said, oh, you don't have to do that. And I said, no, that I is a demonstration of my commitment. I'm offering that because I don't take these commitments lightly. And I believe that two things have happened. Number one is I did so and I earned the right partners because of that level of commitment. Because sometimes if we're passively committed, they're going to put further controls in to make sure that they can compensate for our passive commitment. They don't see a complete commitment. Second, it opens myself up to many partners that have high integrity and will likewise commit. They're committed to that partnership as committed as I am. If I am tepid in my commitment, the other person's going to be tepid in their commitment. And so that is a great example of that as well. And then throughout the franchisees, as a result, that trickles down. So because I'm committed to the partners I have at the top end, I can commit to my franchise partners, and they know that whatever I say to, they expect me to deliver. And conversely, when I ask for something and or they commit to something, I expect that from them as well because I've demonstrated that. And so it's those stories of commitment throughout the process that demonstrate one, my level of commitment, that get reciprocated commitment. And so if we look around us and we have people that are not committed, are we committed to them first? Do we first love them? Do we first commit to them? Are we first invested in them and they reciprocate? Or are we expecting them to commit first? All commit when you commit,
Mm.
right? Which one's the leader? The person that commits first. And so that's why commitment, the first and biggest is the leader. They generally speaking will make the biggest commitment and the first commitment, and others choose to follow and commit along the way.
Well, thank you very much, folks. We have reached the end of our time together. We talked about commitment, commitment in leadership. Thank you very much, listeners. Thank you, Reed, for your time. Episode 8 coming up. We will continue thinking about who you should develop as a leader and also those who you collaborate with. Who collaborates well? That's definitely something to consider.
And now it's time for the last word. If you are low on commitment and you're always trying to find blame, make excuses, or if you're high on commitment and you're looking for opportunity, make sure that you first, if you're low on commitment, change your thoughts. Find a way that you can improve, find a way that you can lead forward. And then, second, make those your words. Speak life, speak future, speak commitment. And third, make those your actions. Truly see things through, that there's no hurdle in alignment with your purpose that you won't commit through. And if you're inclined to quit on your purpose, if you're inclined to quit on others, then commit. That's your opportunity to commit. And it won't be easy. That's the thing about commitment. It's never easy, but it's worth it. I challenge you to commit so that you can see the results of that long term commitment in your life and those you lead.